Welcome to the Monday edition of the 14. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Barry Allen joins me after a wild weekend of baseball. Barry, Super Regionals are still not done. We've got a couple more games to come on Monday. I think this is a good place to start. I don't think this is what we expected we would see from the SEC as we do this on Monday morning, had we rewound this and made predictions a week ago.
No, I think Chris, we're looking at probably one of the most disappointing 10 hours in SEC baseball history yesterday. There are 5 teams still alive trying to get into Omaha, and 3 of them were blown out. I mean, just not competitive games at all. 2 were eliminated in LSU and Ole Miss, although LSU eliminated by Tennessee. And then Mississippi State blown out by Notre Dame and forces a 3rd game tonight in that series. And a lot of people can say and look at Saturday's game, if Notre Dame doesn't make 4 errors, Mississippi State's blown out last night, and they're at home because Notre Dame probably should have won the game on Saturday minus their 4 errors. But the biggest thing was, you know, the blowouts and the teams bowing out. But the biggest thing to me was, Arkansas just not winning, and their offense just didn't show up the last game and a half of the series. They scored 21 runs in the opener and had a 2-0 lead on Saturday, and I think they managed like 4 runs and 6 hits the rest of the weekend, and they're just not going to get it done, not this time of the year. And their leadoff hitter was 0 for 15 with 7 strikeouts, combination of Braden Webb and Matt Goodhart and Christian Franklin over the 3 games. And you can't win if you can't score. And they just didn't score. And it's a high-powered offensive team, and they walk a lot. They lead the nation in home runs. They lead the nation in walks. But in the 2 games they had to win, their offense didn't show up. And you can't fault Dave Van Horn for starting Kevin Kopps yesterday, and you can't fault Kevin Kopps for pitching his rear end off and getting him into the 9th inning. He's got to have some help, and their offense just did not give him any help at all.
No, and look, I'm not gonna say like, okay, Arkansas shouldn't have gotten to the College World Series, but you could see the seeds of this the minute Peyton Pallette got hurt, and they had to go to Kopps more and more, and we're going, my goodness, they're using him a crazy amount, and then it just went off the charts in the regional. You just are sitting there going, okay, how long can they sustain this? Like, even if they get to Omaha, are they going to throw Kopps 6 innings every game? I just started to have a lot of questions. And I was also thinking yesterday, okay, let's say they get through the 6th and it's a 2-1 game one way or the other, and Kopps are just out of gas. How much confidence does the rest of that team have? It just is one of the most unusual situations I've ever seen, because I've never seen a team that dependent on a pitcher, and I've never seen a pitcher used that way.
No, the Peyton Pallette injury did not help them, and it limited their pen. But they've lived that way all year long. I mean, they hadn't had great starting pitching all year. I mean, Wicklander showed up in the SEC, and minus the Alabama game, the opener, where they got drubbed 16-1 and was their 3rd straight loss. He showed up and pitched pretty well the rest of the year, and they just sort of piecemealed it together on the mound with their starting pitching. And Dave Van Horn punched the right buttons and got the right combinations in the game, but and Kevin Kopps was able to sustain 12 wins and 10 saves over the course of the year into national and conference pitcher of the year, and threw 320 pitches in the postseason. He threw 21 pitches Saturday. I'm kind of wondering now, do they wish they hadn't have done that when they decided to start him Saturday night for Sunday's game? They kind of wish they hadn't have pitched him Saturday. One, that would have saved him 21 pitches, but it also gave North Carolina State a chance to, see him in person. There's one thing to watch that on video. There's another thing to watch that in person. And they've seen it, and he had at least 6 or 7 hitters that he faced on Saturday. So they've got a little bit of an idea what the gyro ball looks like, and they got a little bit of an idea what, his approach is. And maybe that helped them a little bit. But I mean, he pitched great. I mean, I can't think of anybody anywhere in any baseball game of any level of all time where a guy has dominated that long and pitched in that many games and just been fantastic. I mean, you can't say anything negative about him yesterday. Gave up the game-losing home run. So what? I mean, he did. It's gut-wrenching, but you can't. There's not one bad thing you say about Kevin Kopps and what he's done for this league, what he's done for Arkansas. I mean, Hunter Yurachek, their AD, tweeted out yesterday, an hour and a half after the game, the kid is still on the field in his uniform, signing autographs for what looked like thousands of kids that were still in the stands. That he's a hero. He's a cult hero in Arkansas. He will be the face of Arkansas till the end of time. But you got to wonder how, you keep running him out and you talk about, well, if they won, they go to Omaha. But when you get out there now, you got days off. So you win, you day off, you win, you get 2 days off, maybe 3 days off. It becomes a different animal out there. And a guy can do that for that long a time out there. But I think not having Paulette and maybe pitching him a little bit on Saturday, might have led to the downfall a little bit yesterday. But they still only scored 3 runs, a 2-run homer and a solo homer. And, let's be honest too. North Carolina State, not a bad team. I mean, they can hit. I don't know if they're going to hit a ton of home runs in Omaha because that's where home runs go to die at TD Ameritrade. But that's a pretty nice offensive club. And Torres homered in every game, and they bashed around Louisiana Tech and Alabama like a pinball machine in Ruston last weekend in the regional. But that's a pretty good offensive team. And on offense, Arkansas just could not, except for Friday night, Arkansas just couldn't match them.
Yeah, it just felt like that offense became a little too dependent on the long ball, and Christian Franklin slumped, and that hurt them too. That the team also made some really good defensive plays for Kopps, who was obviously not the normal Kevin Kopps, but he was still pretty good. But I want to ask you, and I want to get into a couple more things on Kevin Kopps because I like the Hunter Yurachek tweet that you referenced. I saw that too, and frankly, he and Tim Elko are 2 kids that I just find really hard to root against. I just think they embody class and all kinds of things, and obviously they're very talented players that you root for. But let's go to the arm thing because pitch counts are a big thing, and I don't a lot of times weigh in on these because I think that arm injuries are hard to predict. Everybody's different. It's different when you're throwing 98 as opposed to 88. There are many variables here. I think that teams have more analytics and computer-generated information they've ever had on to lend itself to tell them about arm abuse and those sorts of things. But my goodness, I have to think that what they did with him is excessive. And now, having said that, he is not like a top 2 or 3 round draft prospect. He's 24. He's a one-pitch guy. I think he could make the majors. But he's not a prime pro prospect. Again, all it takes is one organization to draft him in a spot, and that's where he goes. But my point is, even with all those things, a lot of people had issues with how Dave Van Horn used him, and I think those are fair discussion points, Barry.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are. I mean, everybody has their opinions about how to do things, and say, well, I don't think he abused the kid at all, and I think if they probably talk with him daily and how does he feel, and they used him a lot in the regional. They didn't have to pitch him Friday night. I think that helped. The only thing I go back to now is you brought him in Saturday when you're behind. You did get it to a 1-run game, and you brought him in and you threw the 21 pitches Saturday. I don't know this. I wasn't privy to the post game press conferences yesterday. I don't know if anybody asked Dave Van Horn this question, but I would just say, do you wish you had not have pitched him on Saturday now, knowing that you were going to start him on Sunday, or deciding after the game about, as he said on the broadcast yesterday, about an hour or so after the game, they decided to start him on Sunday. because they didn't want to get into the fourth or fifth inning and go, man, I wish we'd have started him. Because I think he knew that North Carolina State was pretty good on offense, and I think he knew his team was struggling on offense. I mean, Christian Franklin didn't play Friday night. He's had strep throat, got a couple of ABs Saturday, did not look good yesterday, really struggled in the postseason. As I mentioned, their leadoff hitters, he was a part of that, but Webb and Goodhart, Franklin across the 3 games, hitless in 15 at bats with 7 strikeouts. I mean, your leadoff guys got to get on base. And they didn't get a whole lot out of the top 3 or 4 in their batting order. I think at one point yesterday when I quit tabulating it because it became so depressing, I think they were 5 for 34 in the Super Regional Series. They did all their damage Friday night, 5 through 9, with Charlie Welch, who is slowly becoming another Arkansas folk hero with his deal. But I think the only regret they might have this weekend was using him on Saturday. The guy's a warrior. He embodies college baseball. I mean, he redshirted in 16. He had Tommy John surgery in 18. So I don't really think that his arm is a real issue. And he's not a pro prospect. He'll be very successful in whatever he does. Somebody might draft him and take a chance on him. I would. But he's going to be successful off the field in whatever he does. And, we mentioned him with that injury and R.A. Dickey, having surgery and becoming a knuckleball guy and, increasing his career in the big leagues even further than probably what he should have. But, the only problem I have with and it's not a problem. The only question I have with that is maybe them wishing that they didn't use him on Saturday in the last 2 innings and giving North Carolina State a chance to actually see him in person.
Well, the other part of that, Barry, is they just increasingly went to him in every spot, SEC tournament, whatever. And you go back and look at that again, right? And what that does is every time you use him, that takes innings away from somebody else. And obviously they needed another pitcher or two that they felt they couldn't rely on. I wonder now if in hindsight, Dave Van Horn is wondering, should I have given the ball more to Jax Wiggins or Ryan Costew or Caden Monk? I don't know if Caden Monk was available yesterday. He was a guy I was thinking about. Seems like I read somewhere where he wasn't available. I don't know why that would have been, but it just seemed to me like maybe he lost the opportunity to build some confidence with some of his other guys in key spots the last couple of weeks, and maybe that would have come in handy for them at some point this weekend.
Yeah, and you look at yesterday. I mean, he went 8 innings with Kopps, and then he brought Wicklander in, and to get the last 3 out. So there's 2 guys that threw 129 pitches yesterday, and you bring 2 guys in that's already been, that's already pitched in the series, and maybe he's tried that. Maybe he's looked at Costew and Wiggins and these guys, and he's tried to bring them in situations where they would have some confidence, but 2, where he would have some confidence in them, and maybe they didn't meet his expectations either. We think back to the Tennessee game, what was it that Saturday that Tennessee walked them off, and they took, the Costew they took out, they brought Wiggins in, and he couldn't throw a strike, and then they end up hitting a walk-off. Ferguson ends up hitting a walk-off home run. I mean, there were some issues this year with that where they just didn't have the guys to be able to shut things down. I mean, they that was one instance where I can remember that Kopps was not available, but in the most times he was available and he was their best option. I mean, and in a lot of cases he was their only option. And maybe they went to him one time too many. Maybe they went to him too many times. Maybe the talk going into Hoover was, everybody said, well, Kopps is not going to pitch any in this tournament. What he pitched in 3 games, and sometimes as a pitcher, you got to give your coach some confidence in you, and maybe that's not always the case that happened for Arkansas this year. And Dave had confidence in Patrick Wicklander and Kevin Kopps, and then he had some confidence in some others, and when he felt like the game was on the line, he's like, you know what? We can win this game, and we can win this game with two guys, Patrick Wicklander and Kevin Kopps, and that's where we're going. And unfortunately, yesterday for Arkansas, it didn't work in the ninth inning, and they didn't win the game.
Let's move on to some teams that did advance. Let's start with the most recent as it happened. Tennessee and LSU, the Vols just did what they did all year. They got into LSU's bullpen. Landon Marceau, I think, speaking of kids who probably just got worn down, he was not himself on Sunday for them in a game they had to win to stay alive. But the Tennessee just keeps hitting home runs. They got enough arms to get this far. And boy, baseball excitement in Knoxville, I think, Barry, definitely seems to be, at least in the time that I've followed it, at an all-time high.
Yeah, I don't remember it being any more exciting. I followed them, in the '90s. I was there when they had Helton and Dickey and some really good teams in the '90s, and went to Omaha in '95. Some of those great teams that Rod Delmonico and Larry Simcox put together, at Tennessee, and then the run in the 2000s when Chris Burke was there with Wyatt Allen and then Luke Hochaver. I mean, they've had some good teams, and they've been good. But even with those teams, I don't remember the crowds being quite like this. I think in 2001, Wyatt Allen, who didn't pitch in the SEC tournament at all, and Tennessee went 0-2 in the SEC tournament 2001, and ended up going to Omaha. Came home on Friday night of the regional in the opener and played Middle Tennessee State. Tennessee was the 1, and Middle Tennessee State was the 3 or the 4 in that regional. And it was Wyatt Allen, a first rounder, against DeJuan Brazelton, a first rounder. Place was jumping that night, and I think Tennessee won the game 1-0. Berkey tripled to lead off the game, and they scored on a ground out. They gave up the 1 run, thinking, well, we're going to score, and they didn't. And I remember being a really energetic, enthusiastic crowd that night, but nothing like this. These people have gone crazy. The outside of the stadium was as lively as the inside. And this team's fun to watch. They had 16 home runs in the NCAA tournament. They hit 6 yesterday. Rucker hit 2. Gilbert, Beck, Pavoloni, and Russell all homered. This team beat LSU 5 times. They're 5-0 against LSU. Raise your hand if you've ever been 5-0 against LSU in a season. There won't be many hands go up in the air. I think Mississippi State beat them in '84 4 or 5 times in a year. But there's very few teams that can say they've beaten LSU. And I know this is not, the LSU teams that we're used to seeing, but this is still a good LSU team. They got a lot of really young players, and they're going to be really good. Whoever comes in and takes Paul Mainieri's place is going to have some really good players to pencil into the lineup next year. But this was a really good Tennessee team. They saw Marceau was not at his best. Paul even said that on the telecast yesterday. He said he just looks tired. They took him out in a game in the regular season because he said he went out and talked to him, and he said he just looked tired. And they took him out. I think it was A&M the last weekend, and they took him out after 4 innings, and he pitched high stress, high level innings at in Eugene last weekend. Brought him back on Monday night to close, and he just didn't have his best stuff. His fastball was down a bit. His slider was not as effective, and still he left the game. It was 3-2, and then Tennessee just blasted their bullpen. They scored 12 runs on 6 different relievers. They had no answers to try to get Tennessee out. I mean, there was nothing they could do. Maybe they should have gone to Fontenot a little bit earlier than they did, but by the time they brought him in, the game was so far out of reach, it didn't really matter. But Tennessee, this offense is very explosive. TD Ameritrade is not really built, like, as we all know, it's just not built for the bashing teams. A lot of fly balls go to die in Omaha. That concerns me for Tennessee a little bit, but they can manufacture runs. But their pitching staff, they get in a situation out there where they win some games, and you've got you've got Dallas, and you've got Tidwell and Heflin, and the bullpen of Hundley, Sewell, Connell, and There's one other one. I'll think
Well, they've
of
got McLaughlin is one of those
I mean,
kids. Redmond Walsh. I mean, they've got a lot of
Walsh.
arms. Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
Pleasance. Yeah.
Omaha's built for their pitching. Omaha's built for this pitching staff. If they can win and stay in the winners bracket, they could be a real handful for somebody out there because they're going to get enough on offense. They don't rely solely on the home run, but they've got a ton of guys on the mound that, you could see. I mean, you could see Heflin pitching in relief a couple of times and maybe going, with two starters, and then you get in the finals and you got your starters all set up if everything works out right, if they could get that far. But I saw a tweet last night and you I mean, you can laugh at it if you want to, but I mean, they're going to be 1 of 8. So they got a 12.5% chance to win it just like everybody else does. But somebody goes, can you imagine Tennessee winning a national championship in baseball before Ole Miss, Mississippi State, and Arkansas? And if Mississippi State doesn't win tonight, yeah, I can. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to, but I can imagine that because this is a really good team and they've really played well together. They've got some dynamic performers and they put it on LSU yesterday big time and certainly put it on their bullpen. And they had the crowd. They really had the crowd going for them. It was really fun to watch and fun to see that, a team that has been dormant for so long, Tony Vitello just 4 years ago coming in there and taking over a team that, was just not any good. It just kind of struggled and got them in a regional 2 years ago, was headed that way last year, and now he's going to Omaha. That's pretty incredible 4 years.
Well, I want to leave you with last couple of stats, and I want to table some of this till later in the week because I want to spend today more wrapping up than looking forward. We can spend some time looking forward later in the week. But the Vols hit 98 home runs, gave up 72, and again, you see how the Vol got on that park. But they took 330 walks and only walked, their pitching staff did, 162 opposing hitters. I know that the long ball has been key to their attack, but boy, that part of it, I think, plays well for them in Omaha because I think that the Vols are very patient at the plate. And I think some of the things that have hurt their pitchers during the year are going to be helped by that ballpark. So that's going to be, I think, to me, maybe the most interesting team to see how it adapts out there.
Well, they gave up 4 home runs yesterday. Tidwell gave up, I think, 3 of them, and then the bullpen gave up 1. They've given up the home run, but they don't walk people, like you said, and that's a key component. Arkansas is a home run hitting team and a team that takes a lot of walk, but unfortunately, their season ended yesterday. Now Tennessee's a big home run hitting team in that ballpark and on the road as well. But their hitters are patient. They grind out at bats. They're very hard to get out, and they don't mind taking a walk. And their pitchers are not going to walk a lot of guys, and that is conducive for postseason baseball. And that's conducive, when you get to Omaha. Those free bases. If you walk people and you make errors, and you saw that Saturday with Notre Dame, 4 errors. You make 4 errors and you walk 6 or 8 guys, you basically given yourself no chance to win a game. And Tennessee does not do that.
Well, speaking of teams that can pitch, Vanderbilt has clinched its way into Omaha. The Commodores have not lost a game in the NCAA tournament yet. And it was a sight to behold at Hawkins Field this weekend. I was there. Vanderbilt allowed 1 East Carolina runner past second base, and that was a home run hit in the 7th inning off Jack Leiter. Leiter and Rocker, I've said this from the beginning, you're going to have a tough time beating this team in the postseason if those guys are healthy, which they appear to be. Those guys have dominated the NCAA tournament, and I just was super impressed with what both those kids gave them this weekend. I think they are now 1 and 2 in the country in strikeouts. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. The Vanderbilt bats have not really been great the last month. They've come and gone, but they've been enough when those 2 kids pitch the way they have been pitching.
They gave up 1 run in 2 games to a pretty good offensive club. Not a lot of offense needed there. If you give up a half a run, you only need 1. And I know that's not going to happen every time, but I don't remember a super regional where 2 pitchers were as dominating as those two guys were against that lineup. I thought Rocker was really good Friday. I did not get to see that game. I did get to watch the entire game Saturday with East Carolina. Maybe outside of the no-hitter, that's probably the best Leiter's looked to me all year long. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you were there in person, you could see it better. They just look fresher this weekend and maybe last weekend than they have at some point during the season, because this is a grind. I mean, the SEC 10 straight weeks is a grind, and it's hard to navigate 10 weeks against, because you're not running out there against any bad teams. I mean, even the Missouri can get you if you're not careful. I mean, ask Mississippi State. But they pitched tremendously well. They've had the key hit, the timely hit when they needed it, but just totally dominated East Carolina on the mound. Just unbelievable performances by both of these guys. High strikeouts. I mean, I just don't have enough adjectives to describe how good these two guys are and how good these two guys were this weekend against East Carolina. I mean, it's hard to play a super regional and give up one run to good offensive teams, and that's what they did. And we mentioned Vanderbilt this morning. They clinched Omaha about 2:00 in the afternoon on Saturday, and that's almost been 48 hours. I mean, they've clinched so long, people forgot they've clinched. There are possible 24 games in this NCAA Super Regional. After the 2 games are played tonight, they will have clinched, and the tournament will have seen 18 more games played since Vanderbilt clinched. That's how easy it seemed for them. Just up 2:00, we're done, we're in, and they've got 2 days to just sit around and watch everybody else play. And it's almost like they forgot about them because it seemed so easy, and it came so quickly. Playing that 11 a.m. game on Friday and 11 a.m. game on Saturday, but really a dominating performance for Vanderbilt, and I look for that to continue down the road.
Now, yeah, how many teams hadn't even played by the time Vanderbilt had clinched? It was several. Was at least 4.
They clinched it right about 2:00. Tennessee and LSU had not played a game yet. Mississippi State and Notre Dame were in the 3rd inning, and Texas and South Florida had not played. So 6 teams had played 3 innings or less in the tournament when Vanderbilt clinched.
That's where if you're South Florida, we're going, hey, we're one of 12 teams still playing baseball here, guys.
Yeah. But it was really it's crazy, how that all worked out. But you play that first game every day at 11, and they're 2:00, they're clinched. I mean, they're still at the park because they got their duties after the game. They got post game with the media and different things, but they're probably all home by 4:00 easily. And here they are at 10:00 almost on Monday morning, and they're like, oh, we feel like we've been off for 2 weeks and watching these other games. So I'm sure they're antsy to get in. But yeah, it's pretty amazing that 2 teams had not even taken batting practice, and 2 other teams were just in the 2nd or 3rd inning by the time they clinched their spot to Omaha on Saturday. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, the strike zone I thought on Saturday was interesting to say the least. Jack Leiter got a strikeout on a ball in the other batter's box at one point. And that always helps. But one thing that was interesting is Leiter was throwing 4 pitches pretty effectively, and I think Rocker was too. Rocker's got what they call a curveball, and I don't know. Sometimes I call a little bit of nonsense on these pitches because one day something's a slider, next day it's a curve, next day it's a cutter. So I don't know what to name these things anymore, but Rocker had a breaking pitch working that was about, mid to high 70s that I hadn't really seen as much before. Something was different about it. So I think that's what makes those 2 teams tough is you have 2 pitchers who are clicking really on all cylinders right now in terms of their stuff and what they can throw. And if you can get those called strikes, then God help teams that hit them. But, Barry, their bullpen was really good too. Nick Maldonado closed it out. Luke Murphy was not quite as good as he was last weekend. The velo was, I think, 95, 96 instead of 97, 98, 99. And you saw some contact off him. But really when you got those four arms, you don't need anybody else. That puts Vanderbilt in a really great position when that's all it has to do.
Yeah, they've had some back end of the game issues, but I thought Maldonado pitched good this week. Murphy was really good last week. But they had some issues, I think, in that last game with Georgia Tech on Sunday night last week, where he got injured, and they ended up having to bring in several guys to get through the game. But when you set the tone with Leiter and Rocker on the mound, the rest of it becomes pretty easy. And if they score, 5 or 6 runs, it makes it even easier. They didn't do that this weekend, although I liked late in the game on offense where they blew the game open, added runs, as George Grand always used to say. They played add-on and padded the lead and made it easier, for the bullpen. But if those 4 guys can give them those kind of outings over the course of the next 2 weeks, they're going to be a hard team to beat anyway. But that's going to be a really difficult task for someone in Omaha who doesn't rely on the home run and relies on pitching quite a bit to navigate through that. But I thought they were both really good. You mentioned the strike zone. I see that more and more. I mean, a game yesterday, I was watching Dallas Baptist and Virginia. It's scoreless in the bottom of the 8th. Virginia finally got a run. I don't think either team had a hit through 5 innings yesterday. And Dallas Baptist is trying to make a comeback. They got 2 on and nobody out. And, I thought they walked the guy to load the bases, and it looked like it was 10 inches off the plate. And they punched the guy out, and they got the next guy out, and ended up loading the bases. And then a guy flies out to the warning track in the right field corner. And I thought he hit a grand slam to tie the game. And, Virginia ended up winning that game. So you've seen some interesting strike zones, consistent, inconsistent, whatever. You see that a lot in the postseason, as you're watching more games and focusing more on stuff. And, I thought even in the Arkansas game yesterday, NC State got a few breaks. I thought Arkansas got some too, just wide strike zones and stuff, throughout the tournament. But, if you're a guy like Rocker and Leiter and you're throwing balls in the other batter's box and they're banging them for strikes, you're going to be really hard to hit.
Yeah, some might refer to it the college strike zone, or maybe the Tom Glavine strike zone might be a better term for it. For those of us who remember 1990s baseball. Barry, let's talk Ole Miss a minute. Man, Arizona can just flat out hit. And I don't know that I liked the move of going to Taylor Broadway to start the game. I don't know if something was wrong with Drew McDaniel, but he'd been better recently. What did you make of the way Ole Miss structured its pitching for Game 3?
Well, I think he did what Dave Van Horn did. I think he went with what he thought was his best option. And unlike Kevin Kopps, Broadway hadn't pitched any in the series. They'd not seen him, but it's an unfamiliar territory for him to start. And, he got him to the 4th inning, but he and the bullpen couldn't get him out of the 4th inning, and the game got out of hand in the 4th inning. I don't really have an issue with him starting him. If he goes out there and throws 7 shutout innings and they win, then he's a genius. And if he gets bombed in the 4th inning, everybody goes, well, why'd you start your closer? And, I think my wife asked that question last night too, but do you start Kevin Kopps, who's not used to doing that? Do you start Taylor Broadway, who's not used to doing that? And I said, I've always said that the postseason, if coaches and players approach the postseason like they did the regular season, they'd have more success. I think a lot of coaches and players get into the postseason and they do things they've never done all year long. And I'm not saying that they get dumb or stupid. I'm certainly not saying that. But I think they just get into the postseason and you'll do things. And even in the big league, even in the playoffs and the World Series, you're not going to bring Kurt Schilling in the 5th inning in a regular season game. But you might see the Red Sox do that in the World Series because we got to get 2 outs right here. And I think they do things that they wouldn't do during the regular season and the postseason. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Actually, more times than not, it doesn't work. And that didn't work for him last night. But he was their best option. And once they got rolling, I mean, that's a hard offense to stop. I mean, if you look at this series, that 3 games between Arizona and Ole Miss were probably the least competitive 3 games in the entire Super Regionals. All 3 games were blowouts. Ole Miss got hammered Friday night 9-3. Arizona got hammered Saturday night 12-3, and then Ole Miss got hammered last night 16-3. But none of the games are close. None of them are in doubt. Middle innings to late. Well, I guess Friday night was close till the 5th inning, but Arizona averaged 11 runs per game in the 2 wins they had over Ole Miss. Teams combined for 46 runs in the 3-game series, and the average margin of victory in the 3 games was 9.3 runs. So the least competitive series thus far in the Super Regionals, just because Arizona's 2 wins were ugly, and Ole Miss's win Saturday night was ugly too. I mean, they destroyed Arizona Saturday night, and so I think when you look at that, you go, well, if it's going to be 15-12, if we make it 15-8 and start our best guy, and I think that's just kind of the route that Mike took last night. And unfortunately for him, and unfortunately for Taylor Broadway, and unfortunately for Ole Miss, it didn't work. And Arizona's just a really good offensive club, and they're headed back to Omaha for the second time under Jay Johnson after a real impressive offensive showing last night. I mean, it's tough to navigate that lineup, but their top 3 hitters, we talked about Arkansas not being very good at the top of the order in the Super Regional, but last night the top 3 hitters in the Arizona lineup was 9 for 14, 5 extra base hits, 10 runs scored, and 10 RBI, and they walked 3 times. It means they got on base 12 times. That's not a good recipe for success if you're the other pitching staff. When the top 3 hitters are on base 12 times and they score 10 runs, that's just not a good mix for you.
I'm looking on the Ole Miss site. They've got postseason stats, including Hoover, where Ole Miss played pretty well. The Rebels gave up 19 home runs in the postseason. I guess that's over 12 games, so maybe not as bad if you look at it through that lens. But I'm thinking back to their season and the way it went and the way it could have gone in postseason. I would be hard-pressed to find a team anywhere in America that got hurt more by an injury than Ole Miss did Gunnar Hoagland's.
Yeah, I think that really hurt them. Obviously, we're talking about a whole different animal in this series. If he's going game 1 and Nikhazy's going game 2, that offense was really good at Arizona. But if it's an Ole Miss lead in the middle innings Friday night with Hoagland on the mound and you got Nikhazy going in game 2, Mike probably rolls the dice in the 6th inning and goes to Broadway or wherever he feels comfortable. Maybe that guy doesn't hit the go-ahead 2-run homer in the 5th inning. Maybe they win that game, and then they got Doug Day on Saturday, and it may be 2-0 Ole Miss. But they had a lot of injuries. I mean, Schottenjay was out a while. I think Gonzalez was out a while, or Graham was out a while. Elko, and God bless him, he doubled in the right field corner in his last at bat of the season last night, and probably could have easily just stopped at first base, but he limped and hobbled into second base. And, God bless him for his effort and his performance and him getting a double in his last at bat of the season. But they had a lot of injuries and they persevered, but probably none. Alabama might argue with you that they would have had a different season if they hadn't lost Connor Prelip in their first week of the season. But the Hoagland injury really hampered Ole Miss and really taxed their pitching staff and their bullpen, not only in the regular season but in the postseason. And might have been a different result at Arizona. Might not have. Arizona's offense is really good. They may have bashed him too. I don't know, but I think not having him certainly hurt Ole Miss, in the postseason, particularly in this series, and probably you also say hurt. If he's available in the regional, they probably don't have to come back with Nikhazy on Monday, and they probably don't have to come back with Broadway 3 times in the Super Region in the regional last weekend. May save some bullets for them. And who knows, Nikhazy may have started on Friday and then Hoagland would have been there on Saturday, and it might have been a different story there too. But yeah, that was a critical injury for them and a key piece of their puzzle that came out of their rotation. And I think that did have some lingering effect on them and during the super regional with Arizona.
Last but not least, Paul Mainieri's terrific career at LSU ends in that Knoxville Super Regional. The Tigers, speaking of injuries, if Jaden Hill had not been hurt, who knows how that goes, although Hill really had never established himself as a kind of pitcher like some of the guys we talked about earlier, the Hoaglands, the Nakases. So I don't know. It's hard to say how much that hurt them, but it certainly hurt. LSU just ran out of pitching in the end, and the Tigers had a couple of tremendous freshmen in Dylan Cruz and Trey Morgan, who just carried that offense so much of the season. Both those guys were really good at moments in Knoxville too, but it just was a weird way to see Paul Mainieri go out in Knoxville with LSU, the heavy underdogs, just given that program and everything around it. I know Mainieri had a really tough time at the end. It was an emotional ending for him, but what do we make of the end of LSU's season and of Paul Mainieri's college coaching career?
Well, first of all, Paul Mainieri is one of the classiest people around. He's grown up on a baseball field his whole life. He said he thinks he's been in the dugout since he was 4 years old. His father, Demi Mainieri, is a legendary coach at Miami-Dade in junior college in Florida. A couple of national titles under his belt, Junior College Hall of Fame. I went to the Junior College World Series this year with Shelton State, and there's a plaque at Suplizio Field with all the coaches and stuff in the Hall of Fame, and he's got a plaque out there, and Miami-Dade's got a place out there as a national champion. And Paul was able to win a national championship at LSU. He took two teams, Notre Dame and LSU, to the College World Series in Omaha, and it was emotional. The ninth inning was pretty hard for me to watch yesterday too. And he said after the game, he said in the ninth inning, all I was thinking about was my dad. And, he lost his father in 2019, and they were very close. And they were really close. And my wife was watching the game, and she said, "This is making me sad." And I go, "I guarantee he's thinking about his dad." And I said, "It's just an emotional time. He knows the game's over. He knows this is it." And I said, knowing him, he's probably reflecting on, 40 years of baseball and being in the dugout and his dad being there. And the day he probably needs his dad the most, he's not there. And sorry, I get emotional. I lost my dad in October, and there are days I miss him too. But I could see that yesterday with him. And I said, it's probably really one time in the last 2 years that Paul Mainieri needed to hug his dad, and his dad wasn't there physically. He's there with him, but he's not there to, get him through this. And I think that was hard for him. And I think it was a hard ending to a hard season. Guys had, I think he had neck surgery last year. I think he just kind of realized that, after 39 years and, great life, and 4 kids graduated from college now. His son just graduated from the LSU School of Dental School, or School of Dentistry, or whatever they call it. Just finished that up, and been a great ambassador for LSU, been a great ambassador for college baseball, and was a great ambassador for the SEC. And had the privilege of working around him and knowing him some over the last few years, and just a tremendous guy, and a tough way for that to go out. I'm not sure exactly where the LSU program is going from there. I think, they're talking about Texas. Chris Burt was talking about Texas on the telecast yesterday. When Augie went out, I'm not sure that they got their first, second, third, or fourth choice that they wanted. And they ended up with David Pierce, and that's worked out pretty well. He's taken Texas to Omaha for the second time. I think they batted around Kevin O'Sullivan. That's pretty obvious now that he's not leaving Florida, and he's not going. And, Pat Casey's name came up, and there were some issues with him, and I think that's probably out now. So I don't know where LSU goes, but whoever comes in is going to have a really solid program. and they're going to have some really good players. And it was a tough way for Paul's career to come to an end yesterday. Skip Bertman lost his last game. He got beat by Tulane in the Super Regional in his last game. And so it's going to be an interesting couple of days and weeks ahead for LSU baseball because they've got some really good players, and to see where they go and to see what the next step is for LSU. But they'll not be going away, and they're still one of the preeminent programs, not only in this league and in the Western Division, but in the country, and they will make some noise for years to come. And I will be surprised if they do not have a really good hire coming in and taking over and continuing what Paul Mainieri has continued to build at LSU.
Well, Barry, it is just getting more interesting and more fun as we go. We got some more baseball to be wrapped up today. We got Virginia, Dallas Baptist will be finalized today. We got Mississippi State, Notre Dame tonight, what I think will be a tremendous game. We will wrap that up tomorrow, and I look forward to just talking about that and previewing the College World Series as we go later in this week.
Yeah, it's a critical day for the SEC. I mean, got a chance to get a third team into Omaha, but also got a chance to be lapped by the ACC. If Notre Dame beats Mississippi State tonight and Virginia beats Dallas Baptist, the ACC is going to have 3 of the 8 teams in Omaha, and the SEC is only going to have 2. And they're both going to be from Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Tennessee. The Big 12 has a team in Texas. The Pac-12, I think, a little surprising with Stanford and getting in, but they bashed Texas Tech. I mean, they just bashed them. That was another non-competitive series as well. And then Arizona, but it's interesting. But I think it's a crucial day for the SEC. I don't want to put a lot of pressure on Mississippi State's shoulders, but a lot of pressure on Mississippi State to get it done tonight at home against Notre Dame to get that third SEC team into Omaha and keep that second or third ACC team out. If the SEC wants to continue to claim it just means more and to be the best conference in college baseball, I think they need to have good representation in Omaha. So it's like I said, I don't want to put a ton of pressure on the Mississippi State folks tonight, but it's a big game for them, not only for them, but for the league to try to get that third team to Omaha.
Thank you for listening to the Monday edition of the 14. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast wherever you get those. You can find our content every day on southeastern14.com, and please follow us on Twitter at 14 Southeastern. For Barry Allen, I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for listening to the 14. We'll be back with another episode on Tuesday.